Oh, honey, I'm doing well. You know, I was all dressed, no pants, for church. You know, I know I can wear pants. I'm trying to break out of that. You know, I mean, because, you know, even my sister wore some really fabulous palazzos to our grandmother's funeral. I was like, I was like, are you serious right now? I said, it's definitely a generational thing. I said, Mom, and you said nothing to her. I said, okay. I mean, this is a woman who stood in the middle, in the vestibule of their house in D.C. I was on my way up on the hill to sing for Flag Day. And my mother shouted up the stairs, you better look like you come from something. That you don't sing all those nasty songs. That's my background. Oh my gosh. So gosh. You know what? I'm going to send you something. I did not send it to you.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Now your WCPT 820
excuse me.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Vucci.
The fourth biggest killer in the United States is poverty. And I know that's a sermon for you.
Yes, ma'am.
It kills more people than homicides.
Wow.
Poverty.
Mm-hmm. Thursday, mostly
Yeah, send that to me.
Yeah, I will, because we're going to be talking about that this morning.
That's your latest Chicago weather update.
So, you know, and this kind of dovetails into the president announcing and all of that. But, you know, these are the issues that we've got to deal with.
For sure.
Ready to drive home today, like Tiguan, Taos, Atlas, Atlas Crossport, and more. Plus, every new Volkswagen we sell comes with 3 years no-charge scheduled maintenance. Do a quick search and you'll see why smart people like you choose Hawk VW. The reviews don't lie. We're highly rated on Google, Facebook, Dealer Rater, and we have an A+ rating with the BBB, and we actively support our local community. Now is the best time to buy a new Volkswagen. We've got over 200 new Volkswagen models in stock ready to drive home today.
Something else.
2023 Volkswagen ID4, Volkswagen's first fully electric vehicle. Hawk Volkswagen on Jefferson Street in Joliet. Online at hawkvw.com. I'll present it for 30. For more details, 815-741-1100.
Attention homeowners that have ever had a broken appliance. Right? We've all had broken appliances. I own a home just like you and have found a way for as little as $1 a day to have all the major appliances in my home on a warranty plan. They're guaranteed.
You know what? Let me send this to you now, just so that you can have it.
The heating system, a washing machine, dryer, water
heater,
or
here it
refrigerator
is.
can be. For about $1 a day, all your major appliances are protected.
They're calling it policy murder.
Daddy Warbucks or the Monopoly guy.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Call my friends at the Home Service Club now and get a warranty on your major appliances. It's a free call, and the first month is free. But be one of the first 25 people to call within the next 10 minutes.
800-814-5615. 800-814-5615. 800-814-5615. Again, that's 800-814-5615.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Sarcoma. Odds are you've never heard that word before.
Okay, let me send this
with sarcoma every day, and it's a life-changing word. Life-changing and devastating because sarcoma.
Okay, here it is. I'm trying to text it to you.
And soft tissue more prevalent in children than in adults.
And it's a quick article, but you know, of course, there are lots of studies that you can see. Yeah.
And new therapies are desperately needed. More research and increased awareness is necessary to fight.
I just sent it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You know, because if you're going to speak to people, speak to that. You know.
The real stuff.
Because that's what people are. You know, if you're not talking about that, it's like, you all are missing me. People are not eating out here. I mean, I see it every day at Push. You know, people who come in, and like, you know, eventually we're going to have to turn it into a bit of a soup kitchen, as will you. folks aren't eating. You know, it's like, are you serious right now?
Those basic needs aren't being met.
Yeah. You know, so it's like, you know, you just, you know, we have to do that.
Help Ravina and other blind people by making a tax-deductible donation of your used car, truck, or almost anything with wheels to the National Federation of the Blind. Your
Okay.
donation will help ensure a brighter future for blind children
pull
and adults.
that.
Just call 855-659-9314. That's 855-659-9314. Visit Cars Helping
Miss Jackson, we're about to go on.
Okay.
Cars Helping the Blind.
Well, I'm about to, well, then I will pull this down during the break.
You with a tax-deductible receipt.
This other
And
thing.
if you know someone
All
who
right.
is blind that can use our help, email
All right, let's have a great show.
LC.org.
Praise the Lord. Let the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight.
Dad served in Vietnam.
O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer.
Never
Yes.
talked about it. And my mom knew not to ask. So Dad buried himself in work and self-medicated and would lose his temper sometimes. Loud noises would put him on edge. It got rough. I finally said to him, Dad, you gotta get help.
As a family member or friend, you may be the first to notice when a gentleman you love has been going through changes. Things like withdrawing, drinking more, or increased anger could be a sign of a larger health concern. Help is available.
Dad finally went to VA for one-on-one and group therapy and got some really great tools.
All right. Hey, everybody. Sending you all so much love today. Please go over to my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show
Support the veterans in
YouTube channel. That
recovery
is where they really, really want you to be. But if you have a better experience on Santita Jackson and Friends, by all means, stay there. But I really do need you to go over to the YouTube channel. Robert share. All right, everybody.
Okay. We're going live.
We can change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Freedom. Personal freedom is fundamental to who we are as Americans. There's nothing more important, nothing more sacred. That's been the work of my first term, to fight for our democracy. This shouldn't be a red or blue issue. To protect our rights, to make sure that everyone in this country is treated equally and that everyone is given a fair shot at making it. But you know, around the country, MAGA extremists are lining up to take on those bedrock freedoms, cutting Social Security that you paid for your entire life while cutting taxes from the very wealthy, dictating what healthcare decisions women can make, banning books, and telling people who they can love, all while making it more difficult for you to be able to vote. When I ran for president 4 years ago, I said we're in a battle for the soul of America, and we still are. The question we're facing is whether in the years ahead we have more freedom or less freedom, more rights or fewer. I know what I want the answer to be, and I think you do too. This is not a time to be complacent. That's why I'm running for re-election.
Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Tuesday, April 25th, 2023. 4 years ago today, President Biden announced that he was going to run for president, and 4 years later, he's announcing the same, that he's running for re-election. He says he wants to finish the job. I'm getting a little bit of an echo here. So what do you think, everybody, as we talk about the issues that he's going to be confronting in the next campaign season, and maybe even 4 years? I want to hear what you think about him running for president. We talked about that a bit yesterday, but I want to hear from you today. 773-763-9278, 773-763, WCPT 820. WCPT 820, this is the nation's largest progressive talk radio station and the voice of progressive Minnesota, AM 950 radio. Please meet my morning stars at Santita J on Twitter, at Santita J on Twitter, and the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page, Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. I'm still getting an echo. And the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. The Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. So I want to know what your thoughts are. What do you make of, he was true to his word. President Biden is running for re-election. Some people are calling him the Trump Slayer. At least that's the headline in The Guardian. But he still is underwater in terms of his approval all across the country. But the silver lining, according to this NBC News poll, is that he's more popular than Trump. But what do you make of all of this? I want you to call me at 773-763-9278 as we zero in on some issues that he's going to be dealing with today. Did you know that the top 3 or 4 killers of Americans, we've been talking about gun violence, that's the number 1 killer of our children today, heart disease, cancer. Number 4 is poverty. Number 4 is poverty. At the same time, we are spending globally, Russia, China, and the United States, $2.24 trillion on war. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about global military spending, and let's talk about the 4th biggest killer. Poverty kills more people in homicides in the United States of America. Can you imagine? So let's talk about that today. And of course, John Nichols wants to talk about what's happening over at Fox. And what's happening with Alvin Bragg. And Fonnie Willis. There's so much going on, everybody. So much going on. I'm still getting an echo. So let's work on that. So let's get right to it. We got a lot to deal with today. Of course, at the top of the headlines, President Joe Biden announced his re-election bid in a video that you just heard released early today. He framed next year's contest as a fight against Republican extremism, implicitly arguing he needs more time to fully realize his vow to restore the nation's character. He said repeatedly, I want to finish the job. Disney is laying off several thousand workers across the company this week in the second and largest wave of cuts as part of the media giant's previously announced plan to slash its workforce by 7,000 employees. The latest round of job cuts will impact employees from coast to coast at ESPN, Disney's entertainment division, Disney Parks, and Experiences and Product division, the company said. Wow, Disney. Anheuser-Busch has placed 2 executives on leave after a Bud Light sponsorship with a transgender woman sparked backlash from conservative media. According to the Wall Street Journal and other media reports, the beer maker sponsored 2 Instagram posts by transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney and sent her a can of beer with her face on it. After the post was published, musician Kid Rock posted an Instagram video of himself shooting cases of Bud Light, and on it went. Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis plans to announce this summer, between July and September, that she'll bring charges against Trump or his allies for their attempts to overturn Georgia's 2020 presidential election results, according to a letter obtained by CNN. Investigators have at least 3 recordings of Trump pressuring Georgia officials to push for a special legislative session to overturn Biden's 2020 victory. And she warned in the letter, she sent them out to various, security forces, that there could be unrest. So we will see who will be charged. Everybody, in Chicago, we're going to have a high of 44 degrees today. It will be rainy. There's still a flood warning in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I hope you all are doing okay up there, my AM 950 radio family. 51 degrees and clear, though. The Lakers are leading their series 3-1. They bested the Grizzlies last night 117-111. The Heat are leading their series 3-1, 119-114 over the Bucks, everybody. And tonight the Hawks will be playing the Celtics, of course. Boston leads that series 3-1. The Clippers will be playing the Suns. Phoenix leads that series 3-1. And the Timberwolves will be facing the Nuggets. Go Timberwolves. And come on, y'all got to get you're behind 3-1. Oh, and the Knicks will be playing the Cavaliers. New York leads that series 3-1. Major League Baseball. The Twins 6, the Yankees 1. They will be playing the Yankees again tonight. The Blue Jays 5, the White Sox 2. They will be facing off against the Blue Jays tonight. And the Padres will be playing the Cubs here in Chicago today. And in the NHL, that Stanley Cup, who's going to get it? Well, the Maple Leafs 5, the Lightning 4, the Golden Knights 4, the Jets 2, and the Kraken 3, And the Avalanche, 2. Well, we're going to see what's going to happen, everybody. We're going to see what's going to happen. This is a time of year when every sport is playing, it seems, and it's just so exciting. So let's get right to some good news from Pastor Stephen Thurston. I need some good news today because every time I turn around, it's like I've got whiplash. You know, I got a call this morning, 4 o'clock. Can you comment on the president? The president, what did he do? He released that video so he could lead the news, and he is doing that. So talk to us today. What is the good news? Of course, every Friday at 3 p.m., you can be found on Facebook Live giving a message. Do you know what you're going to be talking about this Friday?
I haven't decided yet, but it'll probably be on the leadership side.
I love it. I love it.
Let's better as they lead people.
Amen.
Yeah.
And take the reins of your lives while you're at it. Oh, did I say that? Yeah.
That's it. Let me give a good word to the married folk today. I normally talk in general, but something would lead me to speak to married folk today, Santita. And I want to help us, those who are married, to begin choosing we over me in marriage. Let me raise the question. Have you ever reached a place in your marriage where you found yourself feeling like you have an opponent rather than a partner or a friend? In spite of all those wonderful things that you said about each other on your wedding day, it's not that hard for a me versus we mentality to take over. Come on, let's be honest. And it's frustrating because deep inside, what you really want is someone to pull together with.
Dr. Knighton is on.
But you're caught in a trap. And hopefully you're trying to figure out how to get out of it because playing the blame and shame game is getting you nowhere fast. Lashing out without rationally thinking or considering your partner's perspective, not thinking about how your words and actions are hurting him or her, and ultimately tearing down your relationship isn't a healthy or sustainable posture to maintain. And as much as you hate to admit it, you two have probably been in this space for a long time. The reality is that it may take you and your spouse a few years to get past the pitfalls you keep stumbling into. But the good news is that it is possible to move past this place, and I want to try to help you in that effort today. I want to show you a better approach to resolving the differences that exist in your relationship. Number one, I want you to avoid the blame and the shame game. There's nothing like blame and shame to make you feel emotionally unsafe. And a dead giveaway that you're playing the blame and shame game is the language that you're using. You always or you never. You're stuck in repeating patterns of criticism and defensiveness. You fight dirty, using simply belittling or critical put-downs to get the other to surrender to your perspective. What you have to realize is that words have power. There are no neutral or empty words. The words we speak to our spouses and our
You have a caller.
is to build us up or tear us down. And this means that you need to choose your words carefully. Blame and shame not only lead to hard feelings, but it's also a terrible motivator. And if this has been one of your conflict tactics in your relationship, in your marriage, see it for what it is, self-defeating. Change the pattern. Replace you language of blame with I statements about how you actually feel. Explain what you have value and pay close attention to how your spouse feels, what he or she values. Search for your part in the blame and the shame game. Lay down your weapons and wrestle with how you treated your spouse like an opponent, and then apologize in a way that communicates sincerity to your spouse. I want you to ask yourself, how am I a part of this problem, and what do I need to change to be a part of the solution? Number two, stop thinking your way is the only way. I know everybody got stuck right there because you think you're just so smart and got it all together.
Yes.
Have you ever heard that it's more important to do right than to be right? Well, doing right involves a lot of listening. It also involves accepting with humility that your way isn't the norm or the right way. Doing right also means responding with kindness and respect, even when you disagree with what your partner is saying. Oh, and doing right also involves digging into your creativity. Thinking that your way is the only way is an opinion full of pride that leads to dead ends relationally. It doesn't stretch you to search for multiple agreeable solutions, and it's an attitude that's toxic to a spirit of unity. Number 3, and finally, fight for we instead of me. It's important that you learn to elevate the value of keeping your relationship strong over the value of satisfying your individual desire. This is accomplished by changing your attitude and being willing to compromise some of your wants for the sake of your connection with each other. It's about fighting for we over fighting for me, fighting for unity rather than fierce independence. Your shared priority has to be that we will be satisfied with the outcome when we have our differences. To fight for we instead of fighting for me, you both need to pay attention to the views and the taste of the other. Both of you have to consider a choice that leaves the other person unsatisfied to be an unacceptable choice. And I get it. This may be a difficult adjustment to make initially, but when you find yourself fighting for me, knowing that you need to be fighting for we, remember this. If I win, we lose. How can we win in this situation? Hey, hope the marriage gets better. Hope I shared something that brings good news to your relationship today.
I love that. I love that. And I think we have some practice having watched our parents be together for decades.
Yeah.
Through the rough and the smooth. And, you know, they are definitely, I can tell you, watching them both of your parents and mine and others, they are we. If you don't believe it, say something about either of them. Uh-oh.
That's right.
Uh-oh.
You got a fight on your hands.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh, and we can see you on Friday and interact with you how and where.
Friday, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time on my Facebook page, Stephen with the PH, Stephen Thurston. Catch me there live, or if not, you can catch the rebroadcast. It'll be there. It'll be on the page.
And we can also see the rebroadcast of your sermon on Sunday, yes?
Definitely. You can go to New Covenant Baptist Church, Chicago, and catch the message that I preached Sunday. We talked about the towels, picking up a towel, and the great debate over who's the greatest. The text says that Jesus says, the greatest among us is he or she that serves. And so when we put our position ourselves in the posture of serving, we become the GOAT, the greatest of all time.
I love it. I love it. Pastor Stephen Thurston, everybody, catch him this Friday, every Friday, on Facebook Live at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. We, of course, have Dr. Shanina Knighton. And, you know, I came across something, you know, and I come across these things, and I just have to ask you other questions because, you know, as we have interacted with Dr. Deborah Holden, and she said, you know, racism is a public health crisis. We've got public health crises that that these two women, of course, Dr. Shanina Knighton, infection preventionist, college lecturer, I mean, she's just so brilliant. They look at our health holistically. But you know what? I came across this data that just broke my heart. They're calling it policy murder, Dr. Knighton, and I'm going to have you stay over just for a couple more extra minutes. But the biggest killer of Americans, heart disease, cancer, poverty. Many of us, poverty kills more people than homicides in the United States. Are you surprised by that? I mean, but, you know, when they dump toxins in brown and black and poor white communities, we don't have the high quality of food. I can go to chains, and I won't mention them, but I know when I go to affluent areas, they have better quality food. Even today, this is stuff that I marched against as a little girl. That, you know, I mean, really. But are you surprised by that? That one of the top 5 killers in America is poverty.
I'm not surprised. And the reason why I say I'm surprised is because it is a cumulative effect. We don't know how that relates. And as you know, my research area, which
you know, where you're cutting off. You're in and out. Okay, make sure you're not on the earbud or anything. Okay.
I don't know why, but I hear it.
No, now it's perfect. Mm-hmm.
But I was mentioning that one of the biggest, I hear myself echoing too, and I'm not on the earbud.
Okay, no worries.
But it's a challenge because I think I mentioned to you that one of the areas that I focus on is hygiene poverty. And that is just the ability to not be able to afford detergents. It's not being able to afford soaps. It's not being able to afford toothpaste. It's not being able to afford, let's say, sanitary items, for women. Disinfectants. I can go on and on and on. And so the irony is these items are taxed in the United States, unlike food, but they are necessary in regards to being able to ward off germs that can then lead to infections. So when you say poverty is one of the highest killers, think about what that does when you cannot afford adequate food and adequate supplies to be able to keep your skin clean and be able to keep your internal system healthy. And so when we look at poverty as being such a huge issue, we oftentimes don't recognize that because it is a huge issue, how it is impacting many communities. And so when we see, let's say, food deserts that exist, and we say, well, why is it that the grocery store removed itself out of the neighborhood? People living in poverty 9 times out of 10 may have been taking items from that grocery store, thus making that grocery store not affordable to be able to stay in that area without taking a major loss. And so it's almost like this, I would say, yin and yang relationship, Santita, in that people need the resources, may not have money to the resources, or may not have access to them, and as a result is leading to unintended consequences. I've seen situations where, let's say, a doctor may have ordered a chlorhexidine gluconate skin washing for a patient, but that solution in itself may cost $30. So if that patient cannot afford that solution and they're using a cheap soap, then they're not going to get the desired effects that physician may have hoped for when they prescribed it. And so oftentimes when we look at poverty, there's a healthcare system to be able to take care of individuals, but doesn't provide a good wraparound service in making sure that individuals have the resources to be able to practice in an equitable manner.
Everybody, poverty silently kills 10 times as many people as all homicides in 2019. I want you to think about that, and I'm going to come back to you. Everybody's calling today. They want to talk about President Biden. I promise you, I'm going to get to you, Mike. I want to hear what your thoughts are. What do you think about President Biden? They say his numbers might be below water, but guess what? Some people are calling him the Trump Slayer. What do you think? Call me at 773-763-9278. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in a minute. Why are we spending $2.24 trillion on the military? Let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Okay. I know that came out of left field, but thank you so much for that. Dr. Knighton?
Well, I'm here. You're welcome. Yeah, I was, it was like an echoing sound.
I know, we were getting that all through, and generally we're able to resolve that.
Yeah, you know how you trying to talk over?
Trust me, yes. I know. Okay, so let me find out where I am here. All right. That. Okay. Okay, who do we have here? Let me see. Okay. Do that. That's what I wanted to do. Okay, who do I have here?
30 seconds.
Okay, who do we have up?
I'm sorry. I'm going to be calling right now. We're having some technical issues on our end.
Oh, okay, no. Just let me know so I know if I need to stretch.
No, I'll
Do
call
we
her
have
right
Chaparral on?
I'm calling her right now.
Okay, well, I
We
can
have,
go. I can go to the caller, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
Stand by.
Mm-hmm.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
And hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am green.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. President Biden is running for re-election. What do you think about that? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278, right here on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want to hear your thoughts. President Biden is underwater, but he's more popular than Trump. But will other people get into the field? Will there be a robust run for the Democratic nomination and Republican nomination, or will we just have coronations? Call me at 773-763-9278. Mike from Park Ridge. Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good morning, Santina. How you doing today?
Oh, good. And it's Santita, but it's all good. How are you, Mike?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right, sweetie.
Good.
So what's on your mind today?
I wanted to chime in on the President Biden re-election bid.
Okay, so what do you think about it?
I've been sitting on the fence about this for a long time because, the Republicans, they know how to play the long game, and the Democrats don't. And
Mike, you still there?
He dropped.
Oh, wow. Mike,
We have Chaparral Wells on.
Mike, call back because I want to hear your thoughts. Because a lot of Democrats are on the fence, and a lot of Democrats are saying, well, if he's the nominee, I'll vote for him. But there's the enthusiasm. There's an enthusiasm that is not there. And but there's an enthusiasm that is there for former President Trump. You can see Governor DeSantis, who's come out. He's not announced that he's running. He, of course, has been the favorite person at least in the corporate media. But I always said, he hasn't been a candidate yet. You haven't put him in the public square. You've not put him in the market of ideas. It's one thing to be a theoretical candidate. It's another thing to be an actual candidate. Mike, you're back. What's on your mind? You said something that was very interesting to me. You said that you'd been sitting on the fence. Why? President Biden has significant, legislative accomplishments, but there's still something about him that's not catching fire with a lot of people. What's on your mind?
What I was trying to say was, the Republicans, they know how to play the long game, and I don't want to run into another Dianne Feinstein situation. That's what kind of scares me about him running again for a second term. The other thing is, I'm a Biden fan. I appreciate everything he's done. I mean, he's done a lot. He's accomplished a lot in the last, more than any other president in the last 50 years. But the thing is, he doesn't offer any energy or any enthusiasm for like the Gen Z community or the Gen Z generation. And I think we just need to get somebody in there to just get us in and over the top and just end this whole thing once and for all, where we could take the White House for the next 8 years, the Senate and the House. And I would say the person that could probably put us over the line the best, and sometimes the time meets them instead of them meeting the time, is Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan. I think the Gen Z crowd would, or the Gen Z generation would move in on her really, really nice. I think that she offers a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy, and
she's very attractive.
She is attractive, and it'll also give us our first woman president.
Yeah, well, because that's part of it too, right? Just because a president is an aspirational figure as much as they are an inspirational figure, and so there's that. I think part of what people have liked about Trump was his swagger, if you will.
Right.
It's perception. It's perception. That's why, we haven't had a portly president in a very, very long time, because at 100 looked like prosperity. Not in the 2000s as much. So do you expect him to do well? Do you expect him to get the nomination? Or do you think that Robert Kennedy's candidacy will grow higher people?
Well, I think if he puts his hat in the ring, I don't think anybody else is going to run. I mean, Robert Kennedy, I don't think is a factor that it's going to really.
14%.
Yeah, I saw his whole speech when he was in Boston. I think it was on Wednesday night. I saw it on C-SPAN. I listened to everything that he had to say. It was actually all. I'm a science guy, except for vaccines. I'm anti-science. It just doesn't work for me. So,
well, I don't honestly, I don't think that's what he was saying, because, in fact, you remember President Trump was going to make him vaccine safety czar. I guess, I'm always splitting hairs because I don't want people to characterize. I don't care where they are on the political spectrum. He's never been an anti-vaxxer. He questioned the safety. He's always questioned the safety of some vaccines, as people have around the world, but we just don't have the space to even do that now, which is unfortunate. But, it'll be, this I think will be a season, because Mike, one of the things that I have learned from this whole piece is that you cannot do anything in the 2000s.
Well, the other thing about Robert Kennedy Jr. is, like, some of the people in the crowd are kind of like the Kelsey Gabbard type people, and also, when you have people like Caroline Kennedy Townsend that doesn't want to support him at all, and some of his other family members, it kind of gives you something to think about,
Okay, well, I think the good thing is, I think that he addressed that forthrightly, because, look, I'm from a family of 5 kids, and we do not agree about everything. And in fact, over the last few presidential cycles, we've supported different candidates, and we still get together for Easter, for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, call each other, how you doing, how you feeling. If one of us gets sick, we are all at the hospital or all at somebody's house. It is what it is. You don't let politics destroy a family. That's out. That's just right. and people agree with him, they don't agree with him. And I say that about anybody who's running. Please don't let politics tear up your house. Don't do that. Don't do that. But we'll keep watching, and I want you to continue to call me, Mike. Because I want to see where the needle moves for you throughout this season. Because I know it's going to move. You're going to get off that fence, and you're going to be somewhere, and I want to see it.
Well, I'm definitely on the side of the fence. I don't want any Republicans in office to gain any power, so I'm on that side of the fence. But I just want somebody that's going to take it and run. And I don't know if that's going to happen with Biden on the second term. So.
Okay. Well, we're going to see. We're going to see. I'm sending you much love, and thank you for getting up real early with us today.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Sending you much love. Sending you much love. We've got Bryce Green from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, historian from the University of Arizona. Dr. David Gibbs. We're going to have Dr. Julianne Malveaux up with us in a few minutes, and Reverend Dr. Marshall Hatch as we talk about some issues that dovetail as we woke up this morning to the news that indeed President Biden is running for re-election. Okay, what are some of the issues that he's going to have to confront? $2.24 trillion in global spending. It's a new high, everybody. World military spending has reached a new high, So what do you think about that, everybody? As we're looking at the news at the same time, the same news day, this news dropped, that the fourth biggest killer in the United States is poverty. Poverty kills 10 times as many people as homicides did in 2019. So what do you think about that? Let's talk about this military budget first, because the Pentagon gets money, Dr. Gibbs, that they don't even ask for. We just, it's like, baby, take this. I think you might need a little extra. Unbelievable. What do you make of this new global high in military spending? What does all of this mean? What did the song say? What's it all about, Alfie?
Well, the war in Ukraine obviously is a major driver of increased military spending, not just in Ukraine and the United States, but worldwide. It just creates a much more tense global environment in which interested parties who want to increase the military budget have a new justification for doing so. I looked at the numbers that came out from the SIPRI Institute in Stockholm. A very striking one was 39% of global military spending was by the United States. China spent 13%, meaning their military spending, and China's economy is larger than the United States, but they spend only a third of what the United States spends. So the image of China as this sort of massive global military threat is very overstated. If you look at really who's the biggest spender, it's by far and away the United States. Russia, by the way, is only 10% of what the United States spends. I think that's up from before. It used to be, 8%, but 10% is very small. And so again, this image of this, hyper-militarized threatening Russia, wildly overstated. And so the question is really, who is the big... One question here is the United States acting defensively? We have a Defense Department, a defense policy, the defense industry. The key question here is, if the U.S. is spending far more than ever any other country on the planet, all of our adversaries basically spend a small fraction of what we spend, then is our military spending defensive? Can it reasonably be called defensive? That's not what the numbers suggest. The numbers suggest, on the contrary, you'll have the United States that is itself an extremely offensive power, arguably one of the more offensive in global history, trying to maintain its position of dominance through force and intimidation. That's certainly what the numbers look like. The numbers do not tell a story of an overwhelming threat from China and Russia. That's not what they show.
Bryce Green, your thoughts? $2.24 trillion, and the lion's share of that is borne by the United States of America, as we are struggling here in the United States for basic things, for health care, for housing. More and more people are having to move out of the cities in which they work because they cannot afford to work in the city in which they can't afford to live in the city in which they work, particularly wage workers. It just seems like something's out of balance. Your thoughts?
Right. Well, like Dr. Gibbs said, a large part of what's driving the spending is the tensions created by the Ukraine war. And incidentally, in not negotiating a settlement with Russia, this was in large part of what the U.S. wanted as a result of this war. You can see writings from people at the Atlantic Council, which is NATO's think tank, who pretty much stated pretty explicitly that one of the reasons that provoking a war with Russia would be a good thing would be that it strengthens NATO. It strengthens an anti-Russian consensus, and it would encourage other NATO members to begin increasing more money or increasing the amount of money they spend on their military. And of course, given that the U.S. is the world's largest arms dealer, most of those increases in military spending largely benefit U.S. corporations. And it's pretty astounding. We're on track to hit $1 trillion in the U.S. budget alone, and Joe Biden is asking for even more money in the next fiscal year. So he recently announced his presidency, but what his presidency represents is a continuation of these policies, a continuation of this global escalation. And why do we need this military budget? Why do we need to have military bases all around the world, surrounding Iran, surrounding China, pushing up against Russia? Why does the U.S. need that? Well, these are questions that the corporate media and mainstream politicians refuse to ask. And no one has really questioned why America needs this enormous military presence around the world. But if you look around the world, everyone seems to be questioning it. In fact, the anti-American consensus is growing even stronger around the world, which largely accounts for the increase in military spending in places that aren't in the Western sphere of influence. One of the interesting things that we see is that even though the U.S. is ramping up its provocations in Taiwan, ramping up the provocative, they call them freedom of navigation exercises, but they're really just meant to provoke China. They're sailing ships through disputed waters with the intention of raising tensions. But even through all that, China has actually increased their military budget at a lower rate than they have in the past, which really begs the question, who exactly is showing restraint here? Who exactly is the aggressor and why? Well, I'm sure you know my answer. It's the United States. The United States seems to want to draw others into a confrontation, to escalate tensions, as part of its last dying breath of this unipolar world. Countries around the world are trying to get together and thinking about how to formulate a new global system of power that doesn't revolve around the U.S. dictating orders and the rest of the world having to follow them, that doesn't revolve around a dollar system that opens countries up to U.S. sanctions. But the entire U.S. military budget seems to be aimed at maintaining that system by force, if necessary. That's a very dangerous situation. And if we don't have real leadership in the White House, one that can understand that this path that the U.S. is on is untenable, one who understands that the only way that we get out of this is if we start to seriously address the bloat in our military, seriously start to address the role, the corrosive role that our empire has played around the world. RFK Jr. seems to be the top candidate who's actually talking about these issues. Joe Biden seems to be more or less part of the problem with these sorts of things. And I'm not really clear on where Marianne Williamson stands on these issues, which means that she would also be part of the problem if she's unwilling to voice these issues in a serious and sustained way. So Americans have a choice to make this coming election season.
Well, but it seems that when people want to pose those serious questions, they get iced out by the media. That's why I've always wondered about how serious the corporate media have been about icing out President Trump. The way you make someone irrelevant is not to mention them. They've done the opposite. They have centered their coverage on him every day. And it's not as simple as, oh, my goodness, he's good for ratings. No. He's good for an agenda. And I'm just trying to figure out what the deal is, what is going on. Or I don't get it. I don't get it. I mean, just before I pivot to Reverend Dr. Hatchell, Dr. Gibbs, Rice, I heard you just say something.
Yeah, it seems to be part of a larger trend, at least on the liberal side of the political spectrum. It's associating any of this anti-war sentiment, any of this criticism of the U.S. military and the U.S. proxy war in Ukraine exclusively with the right wing. They say, well, if Trump's saying it, well, then it must be incorrect. And so they center Trump saying things about NATO, criticizing the Ukraine war, criticizing American empire, which he's not serious about, by the way, but they're centering that. The political left, the liberal left is centering that as a way to cast themselves as the protectors of freedom and democracy. And it's a subtle turn that's happening, is that anti-war sentiment, criticism of U.S. empire, is being done more on the right than it is on the left side of the political spectrum. And that's very dangerous, because the right is genuinely disingenuous when they come, disingenuous when it comes to actually doing anything to prevent these increased military spending, increased militarism. And if the left side of the political spectrum is also feckless, well, then you have the entire political apparatus in this country geared towards war. And that's worrying. It's troubling. And it doesn't seem like anyone's really stepping up to try and change that.
Reverend Dr. Marshall Hatch, New Mount Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church theologian and pastor. What do you make of this? I mean, because we have $2.24 trillion in military spending. It's now, I mean, we continue to go from year to year, breaking records in global military spending, but not so much on the social side. You know, with all these hungry people out here. I mean, of course, we're going to pivot at the top of the hour to the fact that the fourth biggest killer in the United States is poverty, Pastor Hatch. I mean, poverty killed more people in last year, 10 times as many people as were killed by homicide in 2019. Something's off here. Reverend Hatch.
It's such a classic erosion of an empire that spreads itself so far and wide, bloats the military budget, caves from within. I mean, the fact that China's not trying to keep up with that military spending tells us that they're playing the long game, that they see this internal corrosion in the U.S. because the more we spend for this far-flung empire to control the so-called the shipping lanes in the Pacific, to build the North Atlantic alliance on Russia's border, with the U.S. being literally the military for the West. $900 billion of the $2.4 trillion is the American military budget. While as you accurately correlate, we're decaying from within because of that bloated budget and not taking care of the people at home, which means we will have no future. And so it is a classic way that an empire rises and falls when it is extended too far militarily and then simply decays from within. And that was what Dr. King stated, 50 years ago, that any nation that spends more on military than on social programs is approaching literally spiritual and physical death.
And he worried about that for America. And he even said to Harry Belafonte, you know, the fights that we've waged have been right, breaking Jim Crow, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He said, but America as I've been digging, America is a house on fire. This is a country in trouble. It's a society. It's a culture in trouble. And I'm wondering if we're going to stay in the building and get burned up, or if we're going to be the firemen and firewomen who are going to put the fire out. And I just, when we have people running for president and they don't deal with the fact that the fourth biggest killer in the United States, behind Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart attacks, no, it's poverty. Yeah, well, when you dump, Reverend Hatch, toxins in brown, black, and poor white neighborhoods, when you dump opioid pills in poor white communities, when you dump crack in the black community, and we can just keep on going with this, how do you expect to win? I mean, I have to tell you, I certainly have not felt that people should be imprisoned for marijuana possession, but I'm highly suspicious when I have all of these establishment figures telling me, get high. No. You want to know what? High people don't organize politically. High people don't vote. High people don't make changes because they're too busy being high. How about that? And in fact, the prisoner who was exchanged for Brittany Griner, in an interview on Russian television, that's what he said. He said, you won't have to worry about Americans. They're going to be too high to do anything. Pastor Hatch, I got 1 minute before we go. They're going to be too high to do anything. Ouch.
Yes, it's a part of the moral decay, and we see it every day with the young people being drugged out, and they're almost, conspiratorial, where we basically crush the spirit of young people so we don't have to worry about their activism and their revolt. But somehow, just as we saw in Tennessee, the freedom fighters keep on coming.
Every single day. What do you think of the fact that the fourth biggest killer in the United States is poverty, everybody? Poverty. It killed 10 times as many people. Homicides killed 10 times as many people as homicides did in 2019. You can't make this up. Why isn't that at the top of the headlines? Poverty. Bad food in poor neighborhoods, food deserts. Inadequate health care. We have places where women cannot even go have babies in the United States because we're closing hospitals. And yet we're emptying our money into the military budget. It's your money. Think about that. Call me at 773-763-9278. What do you make of President Biden running for president again? And I'm going to ask each of you gentlemen that, too, when we get back on the Santita Jackson Show. And, of course, John Nichols is with us today. He wants to talk about Fox and Tucker Carlson and Down Limited CNN and. Oh, there's so much. You can call me about that, too, at 773-763-9278. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Ooh. Reverend Dr. Hatch, this is Dr. David Gibbs and Bryce Green. You all consider yourselves hail, fellow well met. How about that?
Great, incredible panel.
Well, they are brilliant. Ooh.
Absolutely.
There's just so much going on. I mean, when I saw that poverty killed this many people, I said, y'all, really? And no one's talking about this? I mean, what do you all make of this? We're on Facebook Live, but my listeners love the crosstalk. What do you make of that? Gentlemen? Gentilhomme?
Very few people are making the connection that you're making on this show between, it's the classic choice of guns or butter, and you can't have both. And so, it's correlated that, when we bloat the military budget, we starve the people. And ultimately, it's the decay within. I really believe they're preparing for a war. It's the only reason to build a military. And the aftermath of war is where the New World Order is built or rebuilt or defended. And so it's very dangerous. Very, very dangerous.
Right. It makes me think that we've seen, the Pentagon failing massive audits for their enormous budget, and yet we still give them more and more money. But if a single mother fails an audit for SNAP benefits, she's thrown in jail and kicked off her benefits. They might take her kids away. So who is in charge? Who's making the decisions here? Like, how do those values get superimposed on our society? And, these are questions of power, of politics, of history. It's all the same. The rich control everything and they hate the poor. And they want to use the military to reinforce their power. As tale as old as time.
And use them as cannon fodder. I mean,
Miss Wells is on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's real cruel. It's cruel because these rich men's children don't fight these wars, and rich women, they don't do that. No, or they get a nice little cushy desk job. One of the few families that you saw doing that were the Kennedys. I mean, and they lost family members in the Second World War, and they nearly lost John Kennedy. I mean, just. We're going to have, I'm just struck, though, by each of you really referencing the empire and how it's fading. I don't think Americans have ever really seen themselves as being imperialist or, guardians of empire, but that's what we are. So, I mean, so what does that mean, Dr. Gibbs?
Well, I think that one of the things you're seeing is you are getting this big split between sort of policy elites and sort of in the private sector and in the government, the military-industrial complex, if you want to use that phrase. On the one hand, who really insist on America being sort of not just the dominant power, but almost a unilateral hegemon. That they really want total control of the globe is what they're seeking here. That's what they've sought since the end of the Soviet Union, and they're willing to pay any financial price and risk nuclear war to achieve it. That's exactly what we're doing now. On the other hand, there's a lot of evidence the public is not on board with this agenda at all. And there's a certain awareness that this is going to come out of their pockets. These expenditures will lower their living standards. I think the public understands that, and it's a correct understanding. There's no question it's a correct understanding. The Reverend referenced, guns versus butter. We're spending a lot more on guns than we should, and the butter is going to be less available as a result of that fact. And the public knows this. And I think much of the political tensions, much of the political hatred, I mean, there are other causes as well, we know that, but one of them, I think, is that the public is not really on board anymore with its imperial agenda coming out of their living standards. And elites, it's extraordinary the extent to which elites really are suppressing information here. I mean, just one example is that Facebook has been suppressing the Seymour Hersh story that the United States blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. They're trying to suppress that on Facebook.
New caller.
You read almost nothing about it in most of the media. And so there's tremendous suppression of information here that's really historically remarkable. And the 2024 election could be a very interesting election, especially if the Ukraine war goes very badly for the American side. And it could produce some very unexpected outcomes, especially since you have a President Biden who is going to be 82 and not really very popular, opposing a Republican candidate, most likely Trump, who's probably even less popular. And this could produce some very unpredictable results.
Well, do you think Kennedy will be a factor at all? I mean, I know that he's being ignored by the corporate media, but that's almost working in his favor at this time because most Americans don't trust the corporate media.
Yeah, that's true. Kennedy's an interesting case in the sense that
1 minute.
Honestly, I've never read specifically.
FYI, Miss Chappelle Wells is on.
I'd like to see direct quotes rather than interpretations by the media. Certainly, if he is anti-vax, I would see that as a big negative personally. But I don't want to comment on that because I haven't seen the statements on that.
Yeah,
what he seems to get most attention for now is basically he's very critical of the U.S. imperial project, especially in Ukraine, but more generally. I suspect that's going to be a very popular issue.
Well,
30 seconds.
Including in the Democratic Party.
Also because he's been very public about saying that these constructs killed his father and his uncle. And he's never been an anti-vaxxer. He has always been someone who has questioned vaccine safety. Everybody, please read. Don't listen to this
10
corporate
seconds.
media. Don't do it. Because they don't tell the truth.
Stand by, please.
Stand by.
Manny.
Stand by.
change the world, change the world. Oh, yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing for all the people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Something really important happened this morning. Alex, why don't you line up that clip? It's Tuesday, April 25th, 2023. I'm coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Do we have that clip lined up?
I'm putting it back up now.
Okay, very, very good. President Biden did something that he said he was going to do, and he has done it. And so what does it mean? We ready to play this clip? Well, let me just continue.
Give me
on.
30 seconds.
No. I'll call for it in about a minute. Everybody, he is running for president again, and I want you to hear it in his own words. So call me at 773-763-9278. Tommy, I'm going to get to you. I want to know what your thoughts are. Do you think that he's the Trump slayer, as he's being called in The Guardian, at least by one of the opinion columnists in the Guardian newspaper? They said, well, he might not be as popular as he could be, should be, but at least he's more popular than Trump, and he can be the Trump slayer. So what do you think about that, everybody? What do you think about speaking to the real issues? Is it about Trump, or is it about the fact that the fourth largest killer, the fourth biggest killer of the United States is poverty? Yeah, poverty killed 10 times as many people as were killed by homicides in 2019. 183,000 plus people were killed by poverty. So is anyone going to speak to that today? Is anyone going to speak to censorship that we are seeing in the corporate media? Is anyone going to speak to those issues? Is anyone going to speak to people and our vote? I mean, are we going to speak to those issues? I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. And then what's happening at Fox News? What's happening at CNN? What's happening in the corporate media? They're getting rid of some big people real fast. Now, don't think that Don Lemon and Tucker Carlson can't pop up someplace else again, but it's just very, very interesting what's happening. John Nichols will be talking about that at the bottom of the hour. But let's talk about policy murder. Research shows that the fourth leading cause of death in the United States is poverty. Let's get to some of these headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. The news of the day. Let's play some of that audio. Oh, do we have it, Alex?
Freedom. Personal freedom is fundamental to who we are as Americans.
There's nothing more important, nothing more sacred.
That's been the work of my first term, to fight for our democracy.
This shouldn't be a red or blue issue.
To protect our rights, to make sure that everyone in this country is treated equally and that everyone is given a fair shot at making it. But you know, around the country, MAGA extremists are lining up to take on those bedrock freedoms, cutting Social Security that you paid for your entire life while cutting taxes for the very wealthy, dictating what health care decisions women can make, banning books, and telling people who they can love, all while making it more difficult for you to be able to vote.
Everybody. Well, he is running for president.
When I ran for president 4 years
What do you think about that? I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. And what about the issues that really are the issues that really concern most Americans? Did you know that the fourth leading cause of death in the United States is poverty? In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 44 degrees. It will be rainy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, flood warning, 51 degrees and clear. In the NBA, it's playoffs time. The Lakers lead their series 3-1, 117-111 over the Grizzlies. The Heat are leading their series 3-1, 119 over the Bucks. Oh my goodness, 119-114. And then, of course, we will be seeing the Hawks playing the Celtics tonight. Now, Boston leads that series 3-1. The Clippers will be playing the Suns. Phoenix leads 3-1. The Timberwolves will be facing off against the Nuggets. Denver leads that series 3-1. Come on, Timberwolves. And the Knicks are leading the Cavaliers 3-1 in their series. They'll be playing tonight. It's going to be a great night in the NHL. Who's going to get that Stanley Cup? The Maple Leafs 5, the Lightning 4. Toronto leads that series 3-1. The Golden Knights 4. The Jets 2. They lead their series 3-1. That's popular imbalance here, everybody. The Kraken 3-2 over the Avalanche. That series, however, is split 2-2. The Islanders will be playing the Hurricanes. The Hurricanes lead that series 3-1. The Wild will be playing the Stars. That, of course, is split. And the Kings will be playing the Oilers. 2-2 split. So we will see what's going to happen, everybody. In Major League Baseball, the Twins 6, the Yankees 1, the Blue Jays 5, the White Sox 2, and the Padres will be here leading the Cubs later on today. Everybody, we've been looking at economic freedom. It is possible to buy a home in this crazy time. Got to have Team Hochberg on the show so we can talk about that. And if you're a first-time home buyer, this is your opportunity, everybody. Now, you're a first-time home buyer. If you have not owned a home within the past 3 years, if that is so, please call Team Hochberg. You have an opportunity now, a golden opportunity to own a home, everybody. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID. They're your trusted local lender. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have watched home ownership decline. 34% last year, 26% this past year, and the numbers are falling. But now Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac want to turn these numbers around, and they are looking for first-time home buyers, people who have not owned a home in the past 3 years. They've got substantially lower rates, everybody. Now, these numbers could change at any time, so you need to get in touch with Team Hochberg right now. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID. What you need to do is, if the household income, the people who run your household, if they have an income less than $105,700, you might be eligible for this program from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com. But I would advise you to give them a call, because you should sit down with them, tell them your situation, and they could help you. In fact, they're willing to help you. They're sitting at the phones right now. So call them at 855-56-DAVID. Think about building some generational wealth, starting with you, and handing it over to your children, and handing it over to your grandchildren, and on it goes. That's the dream, everybody. All right, let's get right to it. Chaparral, celebrations by us. What's going on? Got to get some of these vittles.
Yes, Santita, thank you so much. Call us at 708-526-4546, 708-526-4546. Today we're working on a taco bar, so we do tacos as well as also our Cajun pasta, our mac and cheese, our wings, our smothered chicken, our smothered beef. So call us at 708-526-4546, 708-526-4546. We look forward to serving you. Thank you so much, Santita.
All right. You know, we were trying to get Dr. Julianne Malveaux on today, but we're having some technical problems. But we're going to try her one more time, and then we'll get her on maybe tomorrow. Call me at 773-763-WCPT. What do you make of President Biden? What do you make of this news that the fourth leading cause of death in the United States is poverty? Tommy, what's on your mind today? Absolutely. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Listening, a lot of things to unpack this morning, huh?
Oh, every day, yes.
A whole lot of stuff. You know, I called just because you brought up what the Russian prisoner said. And you know what? That's not important. He's Russian. Everything that's going to come out of his face is Russian propaganda. And that just is what it is. But on to the poverty thing. You are so right. I shouldn't say every problem, but most of these problems that we all deal with in this country or are worried about in this country, whether it's the violence, whether it's the inequalities that exist, it all goes back to poverty, right? And how are we going to get a living wage for everybody, right? I mean, we need a living wage. These corporations are being allowed to pay people, and they can still apply for food stamps. How is that even possible? or keeping you from being a full-time employee so you get no benefits. How is that even possible? And then at the end of the year, they pay no taxes. So if people say they don't like welfare, well, what about corporate welfare, which is exactly what that is if they're not going to pay a living wage, right? Wouldn't you agree with that?
You know what? I think we have not learned the lessons from slavery. We have not learned the lessons from colonialism. We've not learned the lessons. You can't take people's land. You can't take people's labor. Black people didn't work in America for free. We were never paid. But guess what? Indentured servants were underpaid and used. I mean, when are we going to learn the lessons? What, and then what do you just tell me, just very quickly, what do you think about the fact that the fourth leading cause of death in the United States is poverty?
Well, first of all, I never realized that. It's horrible. And again, that's why, I brought up the living wage thing, because I think sometimes too often, powers that be, whoever that is, they want us to look at the shiny object, whatever that is today, right? And then you take your eyes off of things like as simple as a living wage, and a corporation's not paying for it. Well, what politicians are allowing that to happen? What politicians aren't allowing that to happen? And staying engaged. For instance, Joe Biden, he throws his hat in today. Joe Biden has been incredibly accomplished. He only put his hand on the Bible 27 months ago. And the bills that have passed since he's been president haven't even really started to take effect yet. People aren't feeling what some of those things are going to actually do for us, because some of those things haven't even been signed, 18 months, 12 months? The U.S. government is a slow-moving ship, and things take a long time sometimes before they come to fruition, and people can actually taste the benefits of what has actually been accomplished in Washington, okay? And so, again, as Americans, we all want it now. I think that's a humanistic trait, right? We want it now.
But Tommy, I think it's more than wanting it now. They need it now. I mean, the fact is, people are literally. Well, hold on one moment, because I'm not cutting you off.
It's a little of both.
Well, it's a lot of that, because the thing is, I'm presuming you have something to eat today, right? I have something.
I'm blessed too. Yes, I do.
But many Americans, creeping toward most, do not have enough to eat. They're having to choose between. They're really making some real survival decisions. Women are finding lumps, and they're like, I don't have the wherewithal to go. I don't have the time. I don't have the wherewithal to go get myself checked. It could be cancerous. I don't know. We can't afford emergency room visits, and on and on and on. Childhood poverty dropped during the pandemic because we were giving people help. We were giving them assistance that they need. Because as you pointed out, we don't make enough money. Even when you're working your buns off, you don't make enough money. Stay right there, Tommy, because I want the panel to respond to what they are hearing from you. Reverend Dr. Hatch, because you're in one of these communities that, it's interesting, because the West Side, you have some people who are affluent, you have some people who are very, very poor, and some people in between. You have everything there, right? You have people who've moved back into the neighborhood, like Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson, who want to help lift the neighborhood up, right? So talk to me, and you and your family. So talk to me. What are you hearing from Tommy? Because Tommy's getting right down to it.
Well, this is the wide disparity between the rich and the poor, and of course, one of the articles we're referencing, policy murder, has to do with when we with COVID relief simply met a lot of the people's needs. We were able to cut poverty by a third, by 40%. And of course, a lot of those supports are now drying up, and then poverty is going to pick back up. But structurally, we have this wide disparity between the rich and the poor that is, corrosive. It's corrosive on the body politic. And one of the substantial changes in the last decade, and I wrote about it in my book, Project America, was that the Citizens United decision, where we had this infusion of money in politics, so much so that now the
government is actually run by the plutocrats directly. And, here in Illinois, every gubernatorial cycle, there's a battle between billionaires. You almost have to be a billionaire to run for governor now in these states. And then when you look at, national politics, it's a pre-selection, and we're already faced with a Trump-Biden rematch, which again has to do with not fundamental change, but at best incremental change, when what we really have is this wide disparity between the rich and the poor, and we really need, dare I say, a radical redistribution of wealth to right this ship. Where the 1%, where the elite rich just simply are not hoarding more and more of our shared wealth, and the poor getting poorer at the bottom, and it becomes entirely corrosive on the body politics, where we have this destabilization.
Well, and Dr. Gibbs, no, but stay right there, because, and I hope Tommy's still there, because Dr. Gibbs, I want to get some historical perspective. Watching one of these old Betty Davis movies, I love Betty Davis. I got that from my mom, and it was, I think, the cotton. It's very interesting, the movies that came out in the 20s and 30s. Particularly the 30s, when we were in the throes of the Great Depression, that really centered on class issues. And this particular movie, she's the daughter of a wealthy landowner who has white sharecroppers. So they didn't kind of muddy it up, if you will, and make it a black-white thing. No, it made you think that if these black folks and white folks came together, boy, could they have changed things. Well, but that's another story for another time. But it was very interesting to see how people were talking about, you had communists, you had socialists, you had all kinds of ideologies that people were putting out there because of the poverty. Because they were like, I can't make it like this, and these rich people they're skinning me alive. Do you think we're moving into that kind of space again? I mean, I know we can control it better now, but it just seems that this class issue, it just keeps popping back up. Dr. Gibbs.
Yeah, well, in the 30s, you definitely did have people coming together along class lines, and very surprising, because, the degree of sort of racial separation, and then it was mostly blacks and whites. You didn't have other races as much. It was a black-white issue. The separation was enormous. It was near total. Not just in the South, but in the North as well. So in a sense, it's almost surprising that people were able to come together as a working class, but that did happen nonetheless, given the extraordinary circumstances of the Great Depression. And you did start having a real authentic left in the United States, and that was one of the reasons, I think, you had the New Deal, is Roosevelt really was not so much a left-wing president as I would see more of as a compromise figure. He was a compromise between an authentic far left, which was becoming very powerful in the United States on the one hand, and the sort of American tradition of dominance by the rich and free market economics. Roosevelt kind of steered a middle way with some very impressive results, I should add, that did narrow the distribution of wealth. And that was the result of pressure from below. I think the Cold War greatly circumscribed that possibilities for change, because the socialist left was largely destroyed during the Cold War by the FBI and the really sort of vicious repression that took place in the late 40s and early 50s. And then in the 1970s, you really had the compromise between the classes that Roosevelt had brokered. That ended in the late 70s into the early 80s. And, you've just had this enormous separation between rich and the rest of us. The 1% of the population has had enormous growth in their wealth, unprecedented in history, really. And the rest of the population have seen hardly any benefit at all from economic growth in the last 40 years. And, that's a really remarkable development. And again, I think that it's coming to a head now. And one of the reasons you're seeing the amount of tension and political instability is precisely, I think, because this class divide intensified by what we were discussing before, which is the issue of U.S. power in the world and overspending on the military. And so I see that as maybe the major issue in American politics and a big source of the sort of anxiety and the tensions we're facing now.
Particularly as we watch de-dollarization. I've talked to some economists who tried to poo-poo the idea. I said, honey, I'm talking to people in Africa right now and India and people overseas. It's already happening. It's already happening. And when you go to our downtown areas throughout the country, it's not as vibrant because the dollar's not as strong. It's no longer, it's just very, very gently becoming, it's ceasing to be, excuse me, the reserve currency of the world. What is that going to mean? And why aren't we having that conversation instead of talking about two personalities, Trump and Biden? It's not about their personalities, it's about your purse. Really. It's about how we live. I'm going to get some closing thoughts from you all as we bring on John Nichols on the other side. On the Santita Jackson Show, we'll be having these conversations and many, many more. July 15th through the 19th at the Rainbow Push International Conference. Please go to rainbowpush.org and go on and get registered. And plan on coming into Chicago. And really, let's be together and let's come together and come up with some answers, because remember, a year from now, we might have a nominee. We might have two nominees for the presidency. We're in 2024 as we speak. Think about that, everybody. We're here. And we need to have our votes protected. We need the president to sign an executive order protecting our right to vote right now. He needs to do it so he can get some votes himself, because there are Republican plans afoot to shut down access to polling places for college students on their campuses. Yeah, they're doing that right now. Come on, everybody. Let's get right to it on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. I'm going to get some closing thoughts from you all. Whew, Bryce Green, you've been awfully quiet. I'm scared. Is Bryce still there? Ooh. Dr. Gibbs?
Dr. Hatch and Mr. Green is on.
Okay. Bryce, are you there?
Calling Mr. Nichols now.
My thoughts are the most important thing for people to understand is that, well, as this presidential campaign ramps up, it's going to take alternative media and alternative voices to force the agenda that the people really need into the spotlight. We need to force the candidates to talk about how the issues of empire and poverty are intertwined. We need to force them to talk about the solutions that have been being ignored for the last 70 years. We need to force them to talk about that. Who knows what will actually happen? You know, I'm not clairvoyant or anything.
Mr. Nichols is on.
Do that. I mean, there's only one way to make change happen, and the first step is to at least force the conversation.
Well, we're the ones that, like you said, we're the ones who are going to have to make it happen. And, you know, don't look for a perfect candidate, everybody. Really. On the right or the left. Because if you're not going to be perfect, guess what? You're not going to get someone perfect. Let that go. It's like looking for the perfect partner. Honey, they don't exist. Because you're not perfect. And if they were perfect, why would they be with you? Let's just let that rest. Start reading what these candidates are saying, what they stand for. Investigate for yourself, because you've got to hire them. You're the one. And we get the leadership we deserve. Because either we don't make the time or we think that we are powerless. We are not powerless, everybody. We are not. You are somebody. Your vote matters. You matter. And you have to know that. And you have to hold these people accountable. These people are spending your money on military and on these military endeavors, misadventures mostly. We haven't won anything since the Second World War. America hasn't. We're still at war with Korea. So when we look at Kim Jong-un shooting all these rockets in there, we're at war with him. Y'all, we have an armistice agreement. We don't have a peace treaty. Is that good enough for you? $2.24 trillion in global military spending, and the lion's share of that is spent by Americans. You need health care. You need some food that is good in your community. You need some food that you can afford. You need to be able to go to the doctor or to the hospital and not worry. Well, that money's going to the Pentagon and to Pentagon contractors. Now, if that's all right with you, then don't vote and don't say anything. Hey, John, how you doing, John Nichols?
I am very good. How are you?
I'm doing well, sweetie. I know you want to go on and light into Fox and CNN, but I've got Dr. David Gibbs. No. Oh, no. Go on and have your fun. I've got Dr. David Gibbs from the University of Arizona, brilliant historian, and Bryce Green, and brilliant theologian and pastor here in Chicago, Reverend Dr. Marshall Hatch, who's going to give some closing thoughts. We've been talking about the $2.24 trillion in military spending that's broken a record, and the fourth leading cause of death in the United States being poverty. So we've had quite the conversation today. So I'm going to let them close, and then you go on to it, because boy, oh boy, watching CNN open up to talking about Don Lemon, I was like, how are they going to handle this? How are they going to handle it?
10 seconds.
I think the discussion about the role of poverty and the role of
standby
disenfranchisement as regards our health is a very, very vital one.
Absolutely.
And so I do not want to interrupt that.
No. You're not interrupting anything. You're dovetailing.
Quite a bit.
Because we're talking about the people who tell the story, right?
Yeah, it's very much a part of our book.
Mm-hmm.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, it's Tuesday. You know it's the bottom of the second hour, so you know it is John Nichols time, national correspondent for The Nation magazine. Of course, he and Senator Bernie Sanders have a New York Times bestseller. It's okay to be angry about capitalism. Yes. I don't know what they're going to call you now, communist, socialist, whatever. But you've written the book and everybody's reading it. Congratulations to you and Senator Sanders. Of course, we have some carryover, and we're excited about it. Reverend Dr. Marshall Hatch from New Mount Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church is doing great work on the west side here in Chicago, and in Chicago, just generally. I hate to confine us to one side of town because we live everywhere. And then, of course, Bryce Green from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, brilliant academician, brilliant analyst, and, of course, the brilliant Dr. David Gibbs, historian from the University of Arizona. What is our takeaway today, Reverend Hatch, from this conversation?
That this is a very dangerous time that we're living in, and the only real reason to arm to the teeth is to prepare for war. And I really think that, you know, when we look at at least the historical precedent of how we came through the roaring 20s, and that was when we had, you know, a lot of money circulating, and that was followed by inflation and depression. And then that was followed by war. And I just really am very disturbed that seems to be the track that we're on, that ultimately there's going to be a fight for who's going to determine the new world order for going forth in the 21st century. And I fear that those of us on the bottom of empire are going to pay an incredible price. The way out, of course, we have to organize. We have to know that we do have power, and that ultimately we have to push from outside this system, inside the system, and of course, you know, demand a kind of radical change that ultimately redistributes wealth and power.
Dr. David Gibbs, what is our takeaway today? I mean, as we see President Biden running for office once again, and, you know, and they're making it about the personality instead of really, you know, making it about our problems and how we get out of them. Dr. Gibbs? Well, Bryce Green, talk to me. Is Bryce still there? Oh, wow, all this run up. Well, you know what? Let me give it to you, John Nichols, as we talk about the people who interpret the news for us before we get to these big firings that happened yesterday. What about that? I mean, $2.24 trillion, $2.25 trillion. I mean, and the lion's share of that is spent by the United States, and a big chunk of that goes to military contractors. I mean, they're the ones who are making the money, and then but people can't afford to go to the hospital, the emergency room. Poverty is the fourth leading cause of death in the United States. This study defined poverty as less than half of the median income. Poverty has killed 10 times as many people as homicide did in 2019. 4.7 times as many deaths as firearms. 3.9 times as many deaths as suicide. 2.6 times as many as drug overdoses. I mean, poverty is a real problem, and no one wants to mention it. It's the dirty little word. It's dirty.
And these are not unrelated. These are not unrelated issues. When we talk about all these media celebrities, right, and all the controversies regarding them, when we talk about the president and his opponents as personalities rather than as champions or espousers of agendas, right? The agendas matter, the personalities should not. What we recognize is that we're often distracted from fundamental realities. And the pastor knows full well, and so do you, that the Lord has given us great abundance. No matter what your religious tradition, no matter what your background, there should be an understanding that there is more than enough to feed everyone, to clothe everyone, to house everyone, to educate everyone, to give people the jobs that are fulfilling and rewarding, and also the time off, the freedom to be with your family, to build your community, to be a part of your church or synagogue or mosque. You know, all of this is possible, right? We have all of this. The problem is there is a massive, overwhelming maldistribution of wealth. And by maldistribution, what I mean is that instead of giving to people as they need and asking of people as they are able to give, we have a system that takes overwhelming portions of the wealth that exists, that is created, and distributes it upward to the very, very rich, the billionaire class, which is growing all the time and growing in wealth, to the very, very powerful multinational corporations, which are monopolizing and extending themselves more and more, not just across this country, but around the world, and to the political elites that serve those billionaires and those corporations. And as you note, among those corporations and among those political elites, there form alliances like the military-industrial complex, which Eisenhower warned us of. This complex, right, tells us that even when we're not at war, even when we are not particularly threatened, we must spend more than all of our rivals on the planet on the military, right? That we must pour resources into not just the Pentagon, not just soldiers who deserve fair pay and deserve fair compensation, but to these multinational corporations which take huge profits out of this system and put it into the pockets again of that billionaire class and of very elite, very wealthy people. And so this is what we should be talking about. Now, I took maybe a minute or so there, a couple minutes to lay that out. That ought to be something that is discussed on a regular basis every night on CNN and Fox and ABC and CBS and NBC, but it's not. Instead, we get lost in the personalities, we get lost in the petty politics, and as a result, we don't have the basic debates that we should be having in this country. The debates that we should be having in this country are about how much we should tax the rich. They're about what sort of excess
New caller.
taxes we should put on the multinational corporations. They're about whether our budget should be a moral document that reflects the values of the great mass of Americans, or whether it should be a tool of the elites to continue this maldistribution of wealth. This is the thing we should be talking about. And unfortunately, even today, as we've seen all this turbulence and as we see all these different pivots in our politics and our media, I would venture to say that this show is probably one of the few in America where the right discussion is being had.
Well, bless your heart, but that's what we try to do every day, which is, and I appreciate your support because you're part of the show and you make that happen. Before we go to one of the callers, because, of course, we had things that we want to talk about, but because I've learned from you as a media professional, you kind of go with your audience because they're the bosses here. Mildred Banks said this before we go to the caller. I was paid $9 an hour, John, and I couldn't afford McDonald's because transportation costs $2.50 for a bus, $2.50 for a bus, and $2.75 for a train to get downtown to and from the South Side. I mean, that's, because people are living in the margins. And to bring this presidential campaign and the state campaigns, or the federal campaigns, the local campaigns, the county campaigns, to bring it down to who can beat Trump. Or, I'm just like, wait. The fourth leading cause of death in the United States is poverty. When I was a little girl, we used to go boycott, on the weekends, because our parents raised us, as you well know, on the picket lines. And I remember my father I was holding his hand, and I was much, much shorter than my father at the time. So I was maybe 5 or 6. And my father's 6'2", so I'm still much shorter than he. But he was walking me forward, and the press were with him. And I just remember my father picking me up so that I could see the flies on the meat. This was in a grocery store, a chain grocery store in the black community that we ended up shutting down.
Of course.
And this was 69, 70. And I'm just saying, people are living like that today. Maternal mortality is higher in the United States than it is in any place in the Western world for white women. For black women, that is multiplied several times. We're not doing well. Who's going to ask those questions? Even as we talk about Kennedy, who's polling at 14%. And I know I keep talking about him, but I'm always suspicious of folks who rain on folks you've listened to the corporate media who you say you don't trust, and you say, well, I don't trust him, but the people I don't trust told me not to. What? He's not an anti-vaxxer, everybody. He's not. And I have not endorsed anybody. But I'm saying at least tell the truth about people. What he is someone who questions vaccine safety. The safety not of all vaccines, but of some of them. You should be asking these questions too. You don't even read the instructions on your aspirin box, which you need to read. We've had infection preventionist, Dr. Shanina Knighton here, who said there are directions for your masks on the box. You need to read them because you're not supposed to wear them for 2 and 3 days. You're not even supposed to wear them for 8 hours. And there's a way to remove them. All that stuff's on the box. We got some real issues. I mean, we really, really do, John. We've got some real issues. And I want you to hear from Brian from Joliet. And I want you to speak to his ambition. What's on your mind, Brian?
Good morning, Santita. And what a wonderfully important show this morning. You have addressed and your guest all the concerns in my mind, with Joe Biden announcing he's going to run again, I firmly believe he needs and to address so many of the concerns you expressed and your guest this morning, a serious challenge from the left. I don't believe Bernie Sanders is going to go again, run again, but I would love to see a draft Nina Turner for president, someone, a true progressive who are going to address all the concerns that you and your guests are expressing this morning And if I may just have a couple seconds to say that if conditions warrant it, it is entirely possible that someone like this can get elected. I have in my hand the Washington Post, Wednesday, November 4th, 1936. President Roosevelt reelected in landslide victory may assure him all but 2 states, Democrats increase big majority in Congress. New Deal will hold president membership, may increase it. So it can happen, but we have to have the right progressive Democratic candidate, someone like Bernie Sanders or Nina Turner.
And they need our support. And they can't start off with us saying, even when we support them, well, you know they can't win. Stop that.
Well, the corporate media generally kind of tells you who to vote for.
But you know what, Mr. Bryan? We say we don't trust them. But we don't trust them. But
No.
But you entrust them with your mind. That is to say, you don't trust them, but when they tell you to do something, you do it. That's crazy.
Well, I know, and it was just the other day, it was even on MSNBC. I haven't heard much what Robert. They played about a minute of him speaking, and in that minute, what he had to say made sense to me. And then the man comes on and spends about 10 minutes trying to tell me, and in my mind, why I should not even consider voting for him. And I'm thinking in my mind, don't tell me who to vote for until I hear what the person has to say.
I'm saying if it's Marianne Williamson, listen, give them the space to say what they need to say.
Right, I'd like to hear what they have to say. I don't want to give it a run. I don't know if she is considering it, but I've heard her speak many a time, and I think she's wonderful.
Let her know. You know I love Nina. Let her know. Let her know. Let her know. And when these people run, the people who run on your inspiration and your aspirations, don't leave them out here by themselves. Support them. Support them. Brian, I want to thank you for calling in today, and you've inspired me. Thank you.
Well, thank you much.
Of course, of course. I mean, so what are you hearing? It seems that people are hungry for something, John Nichols. I mean, they're really hungry for something, and they're not getting fed.
Well, people are hungry. And some people are physically hungry. Mm. Some people are spiritually hungry. Some people are emotionally and politically hungry. I mean, it's this term hunger, of course, which is written large across all the great texts of all the religions, has great meaning, right? It goes beyond simply the basic concept of wanting a piece of bread. And if we understand it as such, right, that's a way of explaining the frustrations and the disenchantment of this time. You know, polling shows that members of both parties and people that believe all sorts of different ideological constructs, right, are dissatisfied, that they don't believe the country is heading in the right direction. This is kind of a universal sensibility. And that is often put in a pure electoral context. People say, oh, that's going to be bad for Biden, or, oh, that's bad for the Republicans, or whatever. What we should step back and understand is that's bad for the country. When you have a country where the vast majority of people believe things are headed in the wrong direction, and they don't have a sense that they have power to make it right, then something is amiss. And so as President Biden prepares to announce for re-election today, as we understand it, that's something that he has to think about a lot. And his re-election campaign ought not be a promise of continuity. It ought not be a suggestion that if you re-elect me, things will stay the same. Because people aren't satisfied. People are not happy. People are, as you say, hungry. And so if we understand it in that context, It's important politically because if he doesn't offer something more, he might lose. He might, politically that might damage him. But it's also important for the direction and sort of the arc of the country, because if people are unsatisfied, even if Joe Biden gets reelected and he doesn't, turn the country in a much better direction, if he doesn't have, as your caller just suggested, sort of victory that Franklin Roosevelt had in 1936, where he really could offer a transformative politics, then we're going to continue to muddle through and not address the fundamental challenges that face us. And if I can say one more thing, you're mentioning Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I've written about him. Now, it's important to say, and I've said this to you before, I'm triple vaccinated, and I've gotten all my boosters, and I'm a very strong believer in the value of vaccinations. And so he and I are in different camps. I mean, it's just as simple as that. And I think that that's worthy of pointing out. At the same time, though, you have to ask yourself, why are substantial numbers of people at least listening to him, paying attention to him, trying to get a sense of where he's coming from? Because he is not merely talking about vaccinations. As a candidate, he's also been talking about poverty and talking quite a bit about it.
And the environment.
And talking about wars and the environment. And what I would suggest to you is Marianne Williamson, who has announced and is campaigning, she is speaking on many, many issues, a language that is very parallel to that of the squad in Congress and of Senator Sanders when he ran. And so you've got candidates out there who are not as politically connected and who, frankly, are unlikely to win. But if they're getting any kind of traction, that ought to be a message to the Biden campaign and to President Biden that people are searching. Now, when people are searching, when people are looking for some alternative, that doesn't mean that the person who is sitting as president cannot provide them with that alternative. Presidents can and have, really charged themselves up, energized themselves, offered a different direction in their campaigns. They have recognized that the people need more. Think about Lyndon Johnson, who your father speaks about so frequently. Lyndon Johnson was a fixture in the Senate. He was a political insider. He was somebody that the Kennedys didn't really want as their vice president, but they ended up with him. And I think there's a tremendous number of people who were very disenchanted with him, frustrated with him, didn't really like him that much. And look at what he did when he assumed the presidency after President Kennedy's assassination. Lyndon Johnson, in 1964, ran for president of the United States as a visionary, as somebody who was talking about civil rights and voting rights and ultimately a war on poverty. Now, he was certainly imperfect. The Vietnam War tells us that. But what we should understand is Lyndon Johnson won that massive landslide in 1964 because he recognized that the people of the United States needed to hear something more. I would argue that President Biden, as he ponders how he runs for re-election, ought to take in that lesson. He ought to look at his rivals and see that, people are searching. But more importantly, he ought to search himself and say, can I offer this country something that is more and better than what I've given in this first term? My answer is that that's really the test. That is the test of any political figure. Can you grow? Can you offer more? And so that's what I'll be looking for today. Well, not for a promise of repetition, but a promise of breaking the pattern and trying to do something more.
And Arlene, I hear you. She said Kennedy and Williamson will not win. They're a distraction. No. Reverend Jackson was called a distraction. Now he's called an icon. Don't do that. As long as you let people who speak to some of the things that you actually like, don't look for a perfect candidate. They do not exist. Your needs, not your wants, your needs will be dismissed. Stop dismissing people before you've even heard them. The corporate media have told you not to listen to Marianne Williamson. The corporate media have told you not to listen to Robert Kennedy and whoever else comes down the pike. Stop doing that. We're shooting ourselves in the foot. Don't do that. Listen to everybody. One thing I can give President Biden a lot of credit for a whole lot of things. And Reverend Dr. Hatch, I want you to stay right there because he stayed with us because he wanted to hear you, John Nichols. And I want you all to give full statements before we get off of Facebook Live and the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. I mean, he is an adept politician. He is not a progressive. He is no lefty. He is a centrist to the right in the party. But you know what he did do? He responded to the absolutely respect that. He responded to a populist mood and has governed that way. Has he done everything I've wanted? No, but nobody does. I don't do everything I want. That piece of cake that I shouldn't have eaten, I ate it. So stop that. Stop asking for perfection unless you're going to be perfection yourself. These other candidates who jump into the race will push him to where you want him to go, or somebody else will manifest. We want a nomination, not a coronation. Think about that, everybody. Think about it. Think about what your needs are. And before you get who you want, get what you need. That's negotiation. That's politics. Negotiate, negotiate, negotiate. You don't get what you want. You get what you deserve. And you got to negotiate that all the way through. So, I love you, everybody. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Lord willing, praying for the family of Breonna Taylor today. The police officer who fired the fatal shot that killed that young woman now has a job with the sheriff's office. You can't make this stuff up. I love you, everybody. Can't wait to be with you on the Santita Jackson Show tomorrow. Stay right here. We're going to be talking with John Nichols and with Reverend Dr. Marshall Hatch, getting some closing calls from them. I love you. Thank you, Alex, for a great show. God bless you, everybody. Reverend Dr. Hatch, what have you heard? Because you've heard a lot of people call in, and you hear this unrest, John. And, and Reverend Hatch, when you come to Chicago, you've got to go to his church. It's a cathedral. And they have the largest stained glass rendering of America's civil rights martyrs of any place in the world. It's absolutely, it's a stunning, stunning edifice. And they're doing fantastic work at the New Mount Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church here in Chicago. But what are you hearing? What are you hearing on the west side of Chicago? What are you hearing on the south side? Because you're not confined to the west side. What are you hearing from the people, Reverend Dr. Hatch? What do they want?
Well, I for the last decade, I've been trying to make a case that, when we were looking, say, again, I wrote a book, came out in 2012, and I saw then that the Tea Party and the Occupy movement, Occupy Wall Street movement, were really flip sides of the same coin, which is why you saw the same voters who voted for Obama and were disappointed, who voted for Bernie Sanders and the Democrats blocked him, voted for Donald Trump. I mean, they're trying to find somebody who's going to be, who's going to radically shake up the system, because most people know that somehow the corporate interests have gotten control and have sold the people out. And so, the example that we've talked about on this show earlier of Franklin Roosevelt and then Lyndon Johnson, in both those cases, the pressure came from the left. I mean, they didn't just act. They acted because they were forced to act. And, one of the great books I read was Traded to His Class, sort of a bio on Franklin Roosevelt's presidency. And, the whole idea was that, that what Roosevelt did was co-opt much of what we now call socialism and saved capitalism, a compromised capitalism, a diluted capitalism, a more humane capitalism for another generation. And so the untouchable program now is Social Security. That was a socialist idea that was co-opted. And so we got to have this pressure from the left. We've got to have these these candidates who come from out of the mainstream, who we, with our idealism and with our faith, support. That's the only way that there is ever any real fundamental change. And the political leaders in the mainstream, they're not going to do it on their own. Can they be useful? History says yes, but only if we make them move. And that's, of course, by holding to our ideals and to our faith and believing that, that we want radical transformation. What we're looking at is absolutely unsustainable. This obscene, wide disparity between the rich and the poor is politically and it's economically unsustainable. And so we have to believe that we have the capacity to force radical change on the system, and that's of course, why many of us who are people of faith are driven into these public policy fights.
So what do you say, John? I mean, because we're in the thick of the season, and people they're hungry for something. That's what I got from every phone call today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you get from every poll. That's what you get from every, survey and every kind of focus group, whatever politicians use to get a sense of where the country is headed. And here's the troublesome thing. Politicians commission polls. They commission surveys. They commission focus groups. They pay a lot of money for this, millions of dollars, to get this information. And unfortunately, they don't use it to find the guidance that the pastor is speaking about so eloquently this morning. They use it to figure out how to win an election, right? And often they use it to figure out how to talk about issues in a way that will make people think that those issues are going to be addressed, but not really address them, right? To sort of thread a needle in a way that causes people to have confidence. But then when they actually get elected, when these politicians get elected, they don't deliver. And that's the crisis of our politics. People wonder why our politics, kind of flips from one side to the other, and why there are so many extremes. The reason is that at a certain point, people begin to deeply distrust the political class. They begin to deeply distrust government itself and democracy itself. Not because they don't believe in government, not because they don't believe in democracy, but because it hasn't delivered, right? And they wonder, why is this? What's gone awry? And then that creates an opening for a demagogue, for a liar, right? For someone to come along and preach a false gospel, right? To offer, some sort of, fantasy out in the distance that if you vote for me, I'm going to give you all these things. Well, you're not going to get them, but you're so desperate, you kind of err in that direction. And the way to counter this is for very mainstream politicians, people like Joe Biden, who you correctly identify as somebody who's more on the center, even a little bit to the right of the party, of the Democratic Party. People like Joe Biden to stop trying to thread the needle in a way that simply gets them elected, and start doing what Roosevelt and Johnson did, as we've discussed in this conversation. Look for ways to win a transformational victory, to win at a level where you really can govern, and then to govern in fundamental ways to make things better. Now, the funny thing about it is, these are not, disconnected concepts. If you offer people a clear vision of what you're going to do and give them a real sense that you will do it, they will vote for you. And if they vote for you and elect you with overwhelming numbers, with not just the presidency, but control of the House and the Senate, then you can govern. And if you deliver for them, if you do what you promise to do, then you will not just win for yourself. You will win for the country. And that victory for the country will have long-term ramifications. Roosevelt won in 32. He delivered, not everything, but a lot, including the beginnings of Social Security, as the Reverend mentioned. In 36, Roosevelt ran and said, I want to do even more. I want to go bigger. And the people gave Roosevelt the biggest victory in the history of American politics. Similarly, Johnson inherited the presidency after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and said, well, we did quite a bit, and I want to continue to do things. He signed important pieces of legislation on civil rights, but he said, I want to do more. I want to go bigger. And the sense that he had delivered, to some extent, helped him to win a massive victory along with that promise to do more. And in fact, he did do more. Now, tragically, he upended so much of his presidency with the Vietnam War. But if you separate out the Vietnam War and you look at what was being done domestically, right, not just civil rights and voting rights, but Medicare, Medicaid, the war on poverty, the creation of public broadcasting, the creation of endowments for the humanities and the arts, feeding not just the stomach but the soul, a really transformational vision.
The Great
for
Society.
The country that had, in many ways, the roots of a New Deal.
Yeah, it's the Great Society. I mean, that's what he was constructing, right?
Great Society. Yeah, people will respond, but you got to break out of this pattern of just trying to thread the needle, and put the needle and the thread aside, and pick up the whole garment, right? And say, this is what I offer. I offer something that is fundamental, and I fret that President Biden may not do that, and if he doesn't, then he may well win in 2024 because the Republican opposition may be so disappointing that he ultimately prevails. But it won't be the sort of victory that allows him or his party to do what was done in the past. And frankly, what was done in the past was, again, beyond politics. It was necessary for the country because it was about economic and social and racial justice.
Reverend Hatch, is that some of the conversation you want to hear, or that you're hearing?
Under the chairmanship of Health, Education, and Welfare of Reverend Adam Clayton Powell, I might add.
Absolutely.
Through that committee, that all of the Great Society programs, many of us went to college on Pell Grants, which came out of that committee. And so it was absolutely, a transformative investment in the people. And then look at what happened, after in the Nixon-Humphrey race, which was Nixon running on law and order. But I think that the point is the way that race is used to divide is what has made the American experiment so fragile and so retro, so back regressive, is the way that race is used to sort of dupe masses of white people into voting against their own economic interests. And it's the same play time after time, particularly when the backlash happens, or the white lash, as it were. And that's a large part of what the Trump thrust represented. And if it's DeSantis, it's the same thing, maybe even worse, with the more polished actor. And so, again, that racial fault line in America that I think our enemies exploit, our adversaries exploit with great skill, particularly in the age of social media, that racial fault line that keeps us from really moving forward. I think William Barber has made his life project, to sort of look at, historically it was called fusion, sort of that idyllic time right after the Civil War when you had, the former slaves, African Americans, and poor whites sort of moving in the same direction in the South. and it was such a time of great hopefulness, which of course later was demonized, particularly media projects such as the Birth of a Nation. But it's again, we have to overcome race and racism for the American project to reach its full potential. And so that's kind of what we have to go back to, and that is the ways that true equality for African Americans and for people in the margins is essential for rescuing this project.
But in part, that's what, I think you're absolutely right, but in part, that is what your book is about. It's okay to be angry about capitalism because you see how racialism and racism and all of just classism has been used to exploit 99%, John.
That is the point, right? That is the point. That, and as the Reverend puts it so very, very well, what we need to understand is that we have a problem in our country with the distribution of wealth. Too few people have too much. Too many people have too little. We ought to be for the many, not the few. It doesn't mean that we punish the few. It means that simply we ask them to give their fair share so that the many have enough to survive. That's a basic precept, again, as old as religion itself, as old as human striving itself. And the challenge that we have with this maldistribution of wealth in America today is that those who are on top, those who are very, very powerful, who have benefited tremendously from an out-of-control capitalism that has, no restraints on it, that doesn't have any more of the protections, many of the protections that Roosevelt put in place, that others we've discussed today understood were necessary. What's happened is the very powerful have figured out that the way to keep their power and to keep their wealth, to expand their wealth, is to divide us, right? And so they look for those dividing lines, those ways to exploit differences. They attack the refugee. They attack the immigrant. They attack the LGBTQ community. They attack women. But above all, and we've seen this now for 400 years in this country, they look for ways to divide people along lines of race. And this has been a long-term project. It's nothing new. But it is writ so large upon these times. And it is so deeply, deeply damaging to our society. And I think that's why we've seen the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. That's why we've seen people of all races and all backgrounds recognize the power and the importance of this movement, because they know that unless we are united and say, yes, Black Lives Matter, and we have to get beyond these racial divisions and build a unity that is strong enough to demand a fair share for all peoples, right? Not to be divided, not to be, pitted against one another. Until we get to that point, the wealthy and the powerful are going to define not just our politics, but our economy and our lives. And so we're in this kind of fundamental moment of challenge. Many of us know what needs to be done. The question is, can we find political leaders who will do it? And I will tell you very clearly, Donald Trump is not that leader. Never has been, never will be. He's a guy who's exploited racial divisions, before he was in politics and since he's been in politics. So it's absurd to think that somehow he's got an answer. By the same token, the question is, do the Democrats who oppose him have the answer? Now, they're better on the issues, there's no question, and they speak a better line. But the real fundamental question is, will there be Democrats, will there be progressives who come forward and say that they are no longer satisfied with narrow victories, with, wins on the margins, that as a country we need to send a clear, fundamental signal that the next presidency, the next Congress, should be about ending poverty in America, not addressing poverty. Horrible word, addressing, right? It suggests that, oh yeah, we're going to talk about it. Oh yeah, we're going to, care about it. Oh yeah, maybe we'll do a little. No. Much better word. Ending poverty in America. And we can do it. We have this immense wealth, this incredible blessing. We live in the wealthiest country in the world. It is not a challenge to end poverty. It is a challenge to get the political will to end poverty. It's a big difference, right? The economics are there. We've got the money to do it. What we don't have is the political will.
Well, I tell you what, either we'll end poverty, poverty will end us, or the people will end it for us. See, what Dr. King did was give us a nonviolent revolution, John Nichols and Reverend Dr. Hatch. Yeah. These people, now white people feel disenfranchised, which is always a very, very different situation because they can't believe that this has happened to them. And that's where we're really reaching that tipping point in the United States. There's a reason that Tucker Carlson didn't have the biggest audience at Fox. He had the biggest audience in cable TV, and he still has them. And you can call him all kinds of many things, but you need to listen to people. Because you need to understand why people plug into them, and people who are sitting next to you, who you think would not give, who you think don't watch Fox, don't pay attention to Tucker Carlson, Robert Kennedy, Marianne Williamson, all of that. Don't believe that. People do all kinds of things, and they don't tell you. When I was a pundit on Fox, I used to bump into people, black, white, brown, yellow, red, all the time. Just saw you on this morning or yesterday. Just stop, y'all. Stop labeling people. Label your issue and make sure someone on the right and the left is dealing with it. Republicans, poverty, the ending of poverty is not a Democratic issue. It's an issue for our democracy. It's an issue for the Republic. It's not a Republican issue. It's your issue. It's our issue. And you need to make sure that all of these candidates on the right and the left deal with it. Push them. Make them do for you. They are courting you. The easy girl loses in the courtship game. Don't just give away your vote. Are you crazy? No, make people work for it. Then they appreciate you a little bit differently. There's some poor Republicans who love Donald Trump. But the fact is, John and Pastor Hatch, the majority of his voters made $50,000 a year or more. That's the biggest lie that the corporate media have sold, that he has poor white folks. No, they really do vote Democratic. And all things are just, all stuff is on the table. And let me tell you, what ought to be on the table are your issues. That are you going to be on the menu. Just figure it out. Get that seat. Get that seat at the table, honey. If you want to be on the menu, if you want someone to eat you alive, then do nothing. And just label people. Believe the folks who you say you don't believe. Just stop. We've got to do not just better, we have to do right. I'm with you, John. Please, don't have a discussion about poverty. End it. We can do that. Nobody should go to bed hungry. Are you kidding? I don't care, rich, poor, and in between. Every child, when they go to school, they ought to get 3 meals. And they ought to be healthful meals. I'm not going to discriminate against a child. I don't care what your parents make or do not make. Everybody ought to be eating real well. The children, when they get home, they should not have to want anything else because they have been well fed at school. We could do that. We could be known for that. We could be known for building people, not killing people. That's what warring people do. We're known for war. We could make a decision about building the top-notch hospital system. We could be exporting doctors like the Cubans do. That's their tourism industry. They export doctors, y'all. They've become the most literate people in the hemisphere. That's what Castro did. Yeah. He did that too. And how do I know John? How do I know Reverend Hatch? Because my grandmama picked beans in Cuba when she was a child and when she was a teenager. Don't you tell me about Castro, because my grandmama has a story. I had to tell my brother when he was in Congress that I said, the next time if you have an opportunity to debate Gloria Estefan again, as they were talking about Elian Gonzalez, I said, you tell him your grandmama picked beans and chopped sugar cane in Cuba. And unlike your other grandmother, she didn't have social mobility because my grandmother Gertrude looked like she was West African. My father's mother could have gone in another direction. Because she was very light, straight hair, all of that. So she had some social mobility. But she was still a black woman, so I'm not saying anybody had it easy. I'm just saying, my grandmother wouldn't talk about her youth. It was so painful. And part of it, and you know what, Reverend Hatch, John Nichols, when we buried her in 2017, she did not want an open casket funeral. She said, I don't want anyone to ever look down on me again. So don't open my casket. Don't do it. My father, of course, opened it because he said we ought to be able to say goodbye. My mother was furious. But she was grieving. I get it. But that was her life. And that's the life of these, those are the lives that these farm workers have today. That's what I mean, come on, y'all. Just they don't have to be black for you to say, hey, what's happening to them is wrong. It's wrong. You don't have to be in the situation to know that it's wrong. So when I see these people on the boats, Pastor Hatch and John Nichols, I see my grandmama on that boat. She was an American, but South Florida was a swamp 60, 70, 80 years ago. So she had to get on the boat and be a day worker with her mama before her mama died, because my grandmother was orphaned at 11. And then you know who else went on that boat with my mama? With my grandmother? My mother. Okay? Because her mother was a day worker, a seasonal worker. Come on, y'all. Really, everybody's got a story. Absolutely. Yes, that's right. Chopping sugarcane. She did all of that. All of that. So when I see these farm workers, that's who I see. When I see someone passing out food in the hospital, I see my grandmother because that's what she did. You all might look at the Jacksons in some exalted way now, but I come from working people who are from the bottom. And I will never, ever forget them as long as I draw breath. I'll never forget Shorty Bub, who made biscuits with cheese in them, who lived down the street from my grandmama Helen. I'll never forget Mr. Dave, who couldn't read or write, but because my grandmother could read or write and filled out his relief papers, he brought them groceries one Christmas when my great-grandmama and grandfather had no job. I'll always remember these people. And I'll always remember their struggle, and I will always try to give voice to them. And you should too. Because the only reason we're participants in this American project is because we're all rejects from wherever we were ancestored. Everybody is here because we were thrown away. And yet God gave us the grace, with all the unkind things that we did, to create the greatest project on earth. The least we can do is make it right. Not make it better, make it right. So come on, everybody. Yep, yeah. That's where I get that work ethic from, Robert. Because my grandmama, you had to get up in the morning with her. Yes, even on summer vacation. Summer vacation, no, you won't get up with her at 6. Because she had to be at work at 7. And we had to bathe. And we had to go over to the base, and she had structured programs for us because she was in the VA and my grandfather was a veteran and he became a postal worker. My father's mother didn't, and my great grandma Tibby didn't let you sleep either. You had to get up in the morning. She said, lazy is the ugliest thing in the world. You never want to be that. Get up and do something. We're going to go to the library. She didn't even know, she couldn't even read library because she couldn't read or write. But she was going to get me there. Because I was going to read a book and I was going to read it to her.
Mr. Nichols is back on.
So everybody, we've got work to do. We've got work to do. And I hope that you all will meet us at the Rainbow Push Convention, July 15th through the 19th, so we can talk about these issues. Oh, yeah, no, I see farm workers, and that's my grandmama. That's what I see. And they don't have to be black people for me to see them, Pastor Hatch and John Nichols. They don't. Don't do identity politics go but so far. People should not have to look like you, be like you, for you to sympathize and empathize with them. Grow up in your politics. A human being is a human being is a human being. That's it. We all get our chance to be on the receiving end of the lash. We all get a chance to be in the fields. Don't you get that by now? You need to read some stories about Northern Ireland and the grinding poverty that these people live in today. They are paying England today to be free. They pay more to England than the Haitians pay to the French. You ought to be outraged.
Mm-hmm.
They're white, you ought to be outraged, period. Because it's wrong what's happening to them. That's why when we go to Northern Ireland, Reverend is a hero, because they see him as someone who's taking it to the empire. What are you going to do? Mm-hmm. And pardon me for going off like this today, but I just hear us. I'm looking at people, Push is open, you know Reverend Hatch. You know John Nichols, we're open 6 days a week. People come in, people are hungry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When this pandemic first happened, black folks and brown folks and poor white folks who worked in these hospitals, who worked on the front lines, they couldn't even get a test for COVID. But in the wealthy neighborhoods, you could go get tested all day long. And we still have not had a conversation through a pandemic about universal single-payer health care. All they could come up with was a shot that is dropping in efficacy. Yeah, I said it. You can bundle up a Happy Meal, but you can't bundle up fruit and vegetables for me. We had farmers on this show, John Nichols and Pastor Hatch, who were saying, I can't get my produce from the fields to the street. No one came up with a program for that, but they came up with a program for Amazon and for the big box stores to make them richer than ever and to kill small businesses. Y'all ought to be sick of that. You ought to be tired of being mistreated this way. You ought to be tired of it. Ought to be tired. And you need to stop discounting candidates before they've gotten out the gate. Just stop it. If all the people who said that they voted for Jesse Jackson, who come up to us now, if they'd voted, guess what? He would have been president. Just stop. Just try to acknowledge a blessing when you got it, okay? And don't look for a perfect candidate. They do not exist. You're not perfect, so you ain't gonna get nobody perfect. How about that? You don't deserve anyone perfect, because that's not who you are. They won't understand you. God didn't even send Jesus here as a deity. God sent Jesus here human, so Jesus could really understand these crazy progeny that God has. How about that? And when Jesus said, you know what, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing, I get it. Because I just told you a few minutes ago that you've forsaken me. I'm sorry. Is that not how it kind of went, Pastor?
It went something like that.
Something like that. He said, okay, I'm sorry. And then God said, okay, you got it now, so you can come on home. All right, got it. Let me open up the clouds, let me rain, because I'm mad with y'all, because y'all, look what you did to my child. But he understands you, so okay. Come on, y'all. We gotta... I know I've gone off today, but I'm hurting as I think about this Breonna Taylor, and they rehired the man who killed her. I mean, y'all really? Ooh. You know, and...
disrespect.
The disrespect. I think about her mama today. I think about her family. I think about her boyfriend. I think about them. I think about Kaylee Gillis trying to drive away with her boyfriend from the man she had planned to marry, 20 years old. She's trying to drive away. They're like, oh, we're in the wrong driveway. Oops. And this joker comes off the porch and starts shooting and kills her and was hostile, wouldn't even go to the police station. What is going on here? This man won't even say, I'm sorry to her daddy. Are you crazy? Who are we? Who We're finding tens of thousands of indigenous children up under schools that were run by the church. Are you for real? Oh, you better humble yourself and pray and ask God for forgiveness, because this ain't right. It's not right. It's not right. So you all close this out, because I've gone on and I've said, but boy, oh boy, it's been a lot. I'm watching this and I'm just watching people just. John Nichols, you have anything you want to say? I know I've gone off a lot.
No, you haven't gone off a lot. You said it right. And I don't need to say anything more except amen. What you said is exactly very much the way I've been feeling. And very much the way I've been hoping, right? Because I don't hear anything hopeless in what you've said. What I hear is, that wonderful demand for something more, for something better. And, that is the oldest demand of all, right? It is the one that we have asked for life eternal. And, the great academic and thinker Claude Levi-Strauss, he was asked, because he studied societies, great societies, he was asked, what was the greatest society of all? What was the greatest time in history? And he says, I hate that question, right? Because that suggests that somehow the best time was in the past, and it wasn't. There was no perfect time in the past. And he said that if you ask about the golden age, I think the golden age is in us, right? We have the ability to make the greatest time now and in the future going forward. And we ought to recognize that and not be talking about make America great again or something like that. What we ought to be talking about is make America great, right? And greatness is not measured by billionaires having more than they've ever had or by corporations being bigger than they've ever been. Never been that. It's not measured by a defense budget that is beyond our comprehension. Greatness is measured by, and frankly, in the way that the gentleman that the Reverend mentioned, Hubert Humphrey, understood. Greatness is measured by the position of the least among us, right? Those who have the least. If they are fed, if they are clothed, if they have housing, they have opportunities for education and jobs and for a future that, cares for themselves and their children and those who go beyond, then that's a great country, right? That's greatness. If they don't, then we have a lot of work to do. And I think you've said it very well today. And I know we got to let people get on to their works and their activism and all the things that they're doing. And so with that, I will thank you for letting me be a part of this discussion.
Oh, please. One of the first people to support this endeavor was you. I called you and you said, hey, whatever you want to do, whatever you figure out, I'll help you do it. And I thank God for you, and I thank God for Pastor Hatch for his support. Just thank you, thank you, thank you. Pastor Hatch, why don't you lead us out with a word of prayer? How about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I can only remember this last challenge of Dr. King, where do we go from here? And of course, we know the path forward as has already been expressed. When the interests of those in the margins are brought to the center, that's when the kingdom of God arrives and everybody flourishes. It's good for our spirit. It's good for our social system, our political system, our economic system. When those on the margins are brought to the center, the least of these, God's kingdom arrives, everybody flourishes. So, Lord, we thank you for allowing us to be alive such a time as this, for the work that we do in our individual spaces, for the people that you call us to minister to, and most of all, for giving us a word of hope in the midst of it all. Believe that in spite of the challenges, there is a way out. And so we thank you for being instruments that you can use in this season, in this time. Thank you for this radio space.
And then thank you most of all for believing that there are countless people out there who you're touching their hearts and who are going to be salt and light in the midst of the world and the darkness and the despair. So we thank you for a reason to hope, a reason to work, a reason to continue to believe that you've called us to make a difference. Every blessing now we ask in the name of the one who says, as you've done unto the least of these, you've done unto me. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. God bless you, everybody. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. And be a blessing to someone. Be kind to someone today. But start by being kind to yourself. Have enough regard for yourself to be kind to yourself. And then you're going to be kind to someone else. You're going to get active in this American project, in this world project. You're going to make this world a better place. What did Donna Ross say? Reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. Because you can. But you got to reach out. I love you, everybody. Love you, Pastor Hatch. Love you, John Nichols. Pastor Hatch, John Nichols has everything but a license. Don't be fooled. He's a preacher, too. Trust me. I love you all. I love you. And Alex, thank you for a great show. Thank you, thank you, thank you, everybody. Love you all. Love you, love you. Peace out, D-Ray, Jewel, Daryl. Everybody, July 15th through the 19th, the Rainbow Push International Conference. We're going to be doing this and so much more. I love you. I love you. God bless you. See you tomorrow, Lord willing, on the Santita Jackson Show.